Who are you? And where are you going? What do you want?
Hello and welcome to Trusts and Estates Weekly. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and I'm here every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time to talk about estate planning and trust and probate administration, primarily from the standpoint of professionals like myself who do this for a living. I guess that's the definition of a professional, right? But also for those of you who don't do this for a living, but perhaps you found yourself appointed executor of your parents' estate, or you're a trustee and you're not really sure what to do. So hopefully this will give you information that will make your job in that regard easier and help you speak to your representatives more cogently. So today I'm going to be talking about a topic that seems to be addressed on pretty much every business podcast to which I listen, and that is the topic of artificial intelligence, or AIs. For the purpose of this show, when I use the term AI, I'm almost always going to mean what are known as large language models. These are things like ChatGPT and Perplexity and Claude, Gemini, and just so what my sort of background in this is. I've been using ChatGPT as an integral part of my business for over a year now, probably a good year and a half. And I also use Perplexity quite a bit, although I'm typically using that for non-business issues, primarily because its computer desktop app does not scroll properly, basically, and so it's too frustrating to use it on anything other than my phone. I have occasionally used Claude, and although it supposedly is the best, at least according to a friend of mine who is still in the United States Navy, I don't particularly like Claude. I do use it for a couple of business tasks, mostly because I tried it out using those tasks and continue to do so because it has the memory of the previous times there. I haven't used Gemini. I hear it's great. I haven't used Grok. I hear it's also great, but haven't used them myself. So the issues that I'm going to be dealing with today are not so much they're not model specific. They are the issues for which we need to be concerned when we're engaged in the administration of a trust or a probate. And so that's going to be the topic. I have I believe 6 thoughts. Yes, 6 thoughts here in my notes, and I'm going to go through them and hopefully give you some food for thought. So let's start out with understanding that whether you administrate professionally the way I do, or whether you're doing this as maybe just a one-off situation for your family, you still act as a fiduciary. That is the central character of the role that we have. And I've talked about this many, many times on this show. So the essence of being a fiduciary is one has to set one's self-interest completely aside, and whatever decisions, actions are taken must be for the best interest of the trust or the probated estate. Okay, so and those things can be in conflict, especially if you're a beneficiary as well as a trustee or as well as a personal representative. And so that's where we really need to be careful, because we need to be prudent in exercising that fiduciary duty. So I think the key thing to keep in mind is AI is a tool, but it cannot substitute for making decisions on our part and for getting proper guidance from qualified professionals. Maybe a lawyer, maybe more than one lawyer, maybe an accountant, real estate professional. Okay. It cannot be used as a substitute for proper input. Okay. I shudder to think what would happen if I went into court to defend one of my actions and I said to the judge, or my lawyer said to the judge on my behalf, well, this is what, ChatGPT said to do. I'm pretty sure the judge would look at me and say, I don't have the authority to revoke your license, Mr. Bemmel, but I'm going to refer this to the Bureau for consideration, because that is not at all a proper way for me to handle the fulfillment of my fiduciary obligation. So the duty to take personal care is non-delegatable, meaning I cannot transfer it. If you're acting as a fiduciary, you cannot transfer it to someone else. I can't even say, well, this is what my lawyer recommended for me to do. Okay. That may be true. Okay. But the decision still rests with me. If I got advice from my lawyer and that advice turned out to be wrong, okay, that doesn't excuse the fact that I made a bad decision. Okay. Or I may have breached my fiduciary duty. Okay. If I got bad advice from my lawyer, that may give me an action against my lawyer for malpractice or something like that. But it doesn't excuse me from breaching my fiduciary duty. Okay. And it won't you either. Okay. So let's say you're dealing with some sort of tax issue and you go to ChatGPT and you find out that okay, let's say ChatGPT tells you that you don't have to file an estate tax return, okay, because let's say the gross value of the estate is $5 million and the current exemption is from estate taxes is $15 million. Okay. And so therefore, since the estate won't owe any estate taxes, it doesn't need to file a 706, an estate tax return. Sounds perfectly logical, doesn't it? Okay. However, there could be some weird aspect of that estate that requires the filing of a return. And because ChatGPT didn't know about that weird issue, it didn't give you proper advice. Okay. So when it's a situation like that, the proper thing to do would be to reach out to a CPA. And by the way, a CPA who is knowledgeable about estate and trust rules of accounting, okay, especially tax law, and check with them. Let them ask you a few questions. Okay. Most accountants, especially the good ones, they're not going to charge you for a 15 or 20-minute conversation where you say to them, hey, here's what's going on. Do you think I need to file do you think a 706 needs to be filed on this estate? Or do you think an informational return needs to be filed for this trust? Okay. Now, recognize the caveat. It's not just any accountant, but an accountant who's familiar with these issues. That's who you need to. But you can't rely on an AI to answer that question. Okay. And if if you do initially ask the question um, to an AI, I tend to say Chat GPT because that's the one I use most often. But if you ask that question of an AI, okay, you definitely need to get some kind of independent verification, unless you feel that you're experienced enough on your own to be confident that the information you got from Chat GPT is the correct answer. Now, notice there's a distinction there. It's not Chat GPT that's making the decision. You are, based on the information that you got back from Chat GPT. Okay. Now, one should keep in mind that we talk about AI hallucinations and such. Those are real, and depending on how you ask your question, okay, some of these AI models will seek to give you the answer it thinks you want, as opposed to the so-called correct answer. So we need to be careful when we put our queries in to be neutral in terms of leading the witness, so to speak. Okay. All right. If AIs can't make decisions for us, where can they be used? Well, so most of where I use AIs is in kind of administrative, not in, well, that's a bad word to use when we're talking about administrating a state, in sort of like clerical duties, if you will. Okay, so if I need to review a lot of information, okay, and I want a summary of it, I may use an AI to do that. So let's say I've got a very long trust document. Okay, I can upload that trust document and ask the AI to give me a summary of the key points. Or let's say that I want to know, what does the trust document have to say about compensation to the trustee? Well, I can upload that document. Maybe it's a 30-40 page, trust document, and the AI can go through it for me, and it can find where in the document it discusses trustee compensation and summarize that. Okay, now again, we need to be careful. We can't assume just because it gives us a summary that summary is comprehensive. So we need to ask it, from where in the trust document did you draw the information for this summary, right? And then just double check it, make sure it didn't miss anywhere or misinterpret what those sections say. Okay, so those are, that's sort of a, if you will, almost a clerical chore. Okay, but an AI can be much more efficient at it. Okay, it can also be used for assistance in drafting a document, but it should be subject to review by the proper advisor. So you may need to make routine notices to beneficiaries. You may be writing status updates or things like that. So if it's within your purview, let's say it's a status update. So I know in my practice, I do a status update at least monthly, in some cases weekly, if the matter is complex and/or there's a lot of activity over short periods of time. So I don't do this, but in theory, I could use an AI to help me draft those reports. Okay, and since they're a status update on the work I'm doing, so then if I review them and I think they reflect properly the status of the matter, I'm good. But if there's some kind of legal issue or some type of accounting issue on which I'm updating the status, if an AI writes it, certainly, minimally, I have to review it, and I may need to have it reviewed by my lawyer or my accountant as well, or the accountant for the estate as well. Okay, so nothing should come out of an AI and be used without it being reviewed minimally by you as the personal representative and potentially one of your advisors. Okay. Another a proper use of AI would be in analyzing data. Okay, so let's say that you've got a property, there's an income producing property as an asset to the estate, and you get monthly reports from a property management company about them. So you might upload those reports. Maybe you've got 6 months of reports. You upload them and you ask the AI, identify trends or areas of concern, reviewing these reports. Okay, and it can help you. Maybe it'll identify some trends that you wouldn't notice just by looking at the individual reports. Or you might say to it, put together a month by month spreadsheet of the data so I can compare it on a month by month basis. Okay. Typically, a management company isn't going to do that. A property management company is going to report on a monthly basis, and they're going to give you the monthly results and the year to date results. But they're not going to break it out, each month for a 6-month period. So if you want to see what's happening in terms of expense trends or income trends for that matter, an AI would be very efficient in compiling that data. And then, depending on which model you're using, it will give you a link to potentially an Excel spreadsheet or some sort of PDF document or something like that. Okay, and finally, an AI may be useful in terms of task management, workflow, giving you workflow efficiencies. Now, I use Apple Reminders. For me, I haven't seen where an AI would be useful for that, but perhaps I do use it when I'm not clear, what a timeline may be. Like, for example, earlier this morning, I had it in the back of my head that one of the estates I administrate has been sued, and discovery was served, and there's a certain deadline to respond to discovery. So I did it quickly in my head because the deadline is pretty short. But if it had been a longer deadline, I could have asked the AI, okay, I have 90 days to respond to this particular request for discovery that was served on March 9, 2026. What is my deadline for responding? Okay. I can tell you for a fact that AI is very good at calculating those dates, because I do that periodically for a different project on which I'm working. Okay, in this case, I use Perplexity to do that. So for those kind of workflow efficiencies and making sure you're staying on top of deadlines, definitely AI can be very good. Okay, let's see. Next. Let's take a look at where AI could potentially create legal risk. Well, as I mentioned a little while ago, an AI does not substitute, it cannot substitute for proper legal counsel. Okay, which is, an attorney admitted to the bar who is experienced in the area of trust and estate law. Okay, an AI may give you, some ideas to discuss with your lawyer, but it cannot substitute for that lawyer. Okay, I don't see a day in the near future when I'm going to show up with, Your Honor, I'm being represented by, I don't know, Chat GPT, right? A little Chat GPT robot, approaches the judge, or is there, in Microsoft Teams, which is the virtual platform that LA Superior Court uses. Not going to happen here in the near future. It's going to be a live person, right? And so an AI can be used, again, as I've just mentioned a minute ago, to help you come up with questions to ask your lawyer, but it's not going to give you the advice that your lawyer would give. That's number one. It can also be problematic if you're using it to interpret documents. Okay. While it can help you pull out pieces of the documents, find them more quickly, in terms of interpreting, for example, how a court might rule on a document, or how a particular paragraph in a document should be applied in the actual administration of the estate, that could be problematic. Okay, now let's say you have a clause in a trust that requires you to report to the beneficiaries. Okay, but it doesn't specifies any periodicity, right? So you don't know, every week, every month, every 6 months, every quarter, what do I do, right? So one of the things you might do is you might query Chat GPT or an AI and say, typically, how often do trustees under the particular type of trust that for which you're the trustee, how often do they report, and what do they report? And ask it that sort of market-based question, right? So that you have an idea of what maybe the standard is, and then you can double check that standard. So maybe, hopefully, if you're a professional, then presumably you do, but if you're not a professional, maybe contact a professional and say, hey, here's the situation. What do you think about, it appears that trustees are basically in this situation reporting every quarter or every year or whatever. Say, what do you think about that? And get some input from some advisors. Ask your lawyer. I'm trying to figure out, what is my reporting periodicity obligation? Okay, and your lawyer should be able to help you with that. Okay, but at least, getting some picture of that from an AI would be fine. Using the AI conclusively to interpret that clause would potentially create a legal risk. Okay, another issue. So oftentimes a trust will carry a provision that says distributions need to be made for the health, education, maintenance, and support of the beneficiary, right? And so while you may query the AI and say, typically, what kind of expenses fall under health, education, maintenance, and support? Okay, and that would be sort of going out to the market and getting a bunch of opinions about that. That might be fine. You could not rely on what the AI tells you in making your own decisions. Those decisions have to be yours, based on the specific facts of the particular situation. So let's say, for example, that a trip to Europe, okay, maybe the AI tells you that a trip to Europe, generally speaking, is not included in health, education, maintenance, and support. Okay, and the beneficiary has asked for a distribution to take a trip to Europe, and you think, well, the AI says no, so my answer is no. That's going to create a legal risk for you. Okay, one of the parts that's missing in that is ask them, why do you want to go to Europe? Oh, well, my child has this, God forbid, rare disease, and I want to take my child there to meet with a specialist. Oh, okay. So that travel has potentially, potentially a nexus to health maintenance and support. Okay, or even education, right? So, or maybe it's something not quite so cataclysmic. Maybe the person is a chef and they want to go to Italy to study under to study Italian cooking. Well, that could very well fall under the category of education, right? And so we need to make our own broader investigation, okay, and make sure that we're exercising our human judgment, not defaulting to what the AI says. Okay, and then finally, I spoke about taxes. So estate and income taxes and income tax returns, they need to be minimally reviewed, I would argue, prepared by a qualified accountant. Okay, so using an AI to make tax determinations would create big time legal risk. Okay, let's take a quick break. When life brings unexpected changes, managing inherited property shouldn't add to your stress. Magnum Properties specializes in probate and trust real estate management. We handle the complexities while you focus on what matters most. From property maintenance to tenant relations, from legal compliance to maximizing value, we're your trusted partner through every step. Magnum Properties, Inc., turning property challenges into peace of mind. Call us today at 213 264 4396 or visit magnumprops.com. Okay, next, let's talk about confidentiality, privacy, and data security concerns. So, one of the things about which you need to be careful is if you are uploading documents into the AI system, what does that mean? Okay. Now if you've been following AI at all, so you know that there's lots of discussion about AIs, taking at least potentially copyrighted materials in order to train their LLMs, and there's been quite a bit of pulling of hair and gnashing of teeth over that. Those are complex legal issues. I'm not here to talk about those, but if we upload documents into an AI, what is their policy on document retention and the use of uploaded documents to train models? Okay, and to the extent that they are retaining them, what does that mean? So that is an area where we need to be careful, especially if you're using the free versions. Okay, so right now I do use just the free versions. I don't upload any proprietary documents like a trust agreement or something like that, because I don't know enough about how the various models handle those issues, and I don't want to create a confidentiality or a breach of privacy issue by having those documents, by having uploaded those documents. So another issue could be, if the document is uploaded, have I waived some kind of privilege? Right. One of the benefits of someone having a trust is it's not public information. Okay, so when an estate is administrated via a trust, there is no court record because there's no probate filed. And so the administration proceedings stay essentially confidential, as opposed to a probate, which is a court proceeding and for which a lot, not necessarily all, but a lot of the information may be open to the public. Okay. And so by uploading a trust document, is confidentiality essentially being waived or at least breached, such that people who ordinarily would not have access to that information now might have access to it. Now, especially in a case that has some level of publicity, if you will, maybe it's a celebrity, the administration of a celebrity's estate, right? And people tend to be curious about this stuff. Okay, for good or for bad. I mean, there's a lot of interest in things that uh, you know. I would argue people have no business knowing about. Okay, but by uploading them to the AI, have you now created a path whereby, I don't know, a reporter or somebody else would have access to it that they otherwise would not have? And what kind of liability um, would that mean for you? Okay, so before you would use an AI, let me before I get to that one, another issue is issues like healthcare documents. So now you've got HIPAA, I forget what HIPAA stands for. It's basically a confidentiality law with regard to information about someone's health. So it narrowly constrains when that information can be revealed. Okay, and the fact of the matter is, uploading health data into an AI could potentially mean that there's been a HIPAA violation. Okay. The same may be true of financial documents. There's no HIPAA for financial documents per se, but there are sensitive financial records, certainly things that have personally identifiable information, so-called PII, things like social security numbers, bank accounts, okay, potentially very problematic to upload documents that have that information in them, or to input it directly into an AI. Okay, and so before taking any of those steps, and by the way, lawyers do in some cases upload that kind of information. This is why lawyers have special editions, if you will, of AI models that have the kind of excuse me, confidentiality, privileged access protocols that the publicly available models do not. Okay, so before uploading any of that type of information, you need to do some due diligence on the vendor, whichever model it is that you're using. So, what are the vendor's data retention policies? Is the data encrypted? Is it anatomized? Or does it essentially remain in the system complete so that someone who works for the company could potentially have somebody who works for that vendor might have access to that data? Okay. In general, it would be, I think, grossly imprudent to rely on the free models, the publicly available models, from a confidentiality and privacy and data security perspective. Okay, you're probably going to need at least some kind of enterprise level AI that has contractual protections, encryption, etc. If you want to use it, or if you want to use it with the kind of confidential information or privileged information that oftentimes is in the possession of someone who is a fiduciary. Okay, so we've talked about where legal risks could be incurred. I've talked about privacy and confidentiality issues, and the risks if they were potentially breached. So let's talk now about the litigation implications. Okay, so first of all, is the and these are speculative questions. So to be honest with you, I don't know the answer to all of these questions. And the first one is a big one. So what is this discoverability of responses and outputs that one gets from an AI? Okay, is that something that if you're required to respond to discovery needs to be included in the discovery? Okay, so could usage logs be evidence? Um, um, and could responses that you've gotten from AI be evidence? Okay, and this is why it's so important that if you are going to use an AI in your fiduciary activities, that you be very careful about how you use it and make sure you haven't substituted it for proper advice, for using your own judgment in making decisions, that you haven't in essence essentially let it supplant you as the fiduciary. Okay, and if the prompts coming out of an AI are discoverable, and let's say someone suing you sees there's a pattern of, this is what the AI says, this is what you did, right? So you know, and they can get a hold of those prompts. So now you may be, you know, you may have caused yourself a big problem because, you know, number one, you didn't determine in advance whether the responses you got from the AI were discoverable, number one, and number two, you didn't perhaps you didn't you know, do your due diligence beyond the AI. Okay, I'm not saying that you didn't. It's just it certainly it might appear so, and so then you're going to have to be able to show, okay, well, yes, this is the response I got from the AI, and then after that, here's what I did to investigate further before I made my decision. And in the end, it is not coincidence per se that what the AI recommended and what I decided are the same thing. But you know, I think I queried the AI pretty well, and then when I checked with my advisors, they advised me in such a way that it became apparent that this indeed was the best decision, and so that's why I made that decision. But the AI did not make the decision. Okay. Um, I mentioned this at the beginning, and that is, I relied on an AI is not a defense. Okay. I cannot imagine any judge, no matter how competent or not thereof, right, accepting that as any justification for anything that you have done. Okay, I wouldn't expect a let's say that you need to sell a property, and so you go to an AI and you say, you know, what is the house at 123 North Main Street worth? And it spits out the number. Okay, and you decide, okay, I've got someone who wants to buy the house for that number, I'm going to go ahead and sell it for that number. And then it turns out that she sold the house for too low a price. I cannot imagine the judge saying, yeah, that was fine. You know, I think the judge is far more likely to say, are you a qualified real estate professional? No. Oh, well, then why didn't you get one involved in this sale? In the sale of this property, or at least getting a proper valuation of the property, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so it you know, and by the way, AIs potentially could be very good at valuing properties, and in fact, automated valuation models have been around now for, gosh, at least 2, maybe 3 decades or more. When I say around, I mean in general use for at least 2, maybe 3 decades or more. Okay, but just because that is the case doesn't mean that you can substitute what the AI tells you for your own judgment. Okay, another problem with AIs that I've mentioned a little bit is hallucinations, that to which AIs are sometimes subject. And so if you've let's say you're asking it a legal question, okay, and it gives you the answer, okay, and the answer looks like the one you want, okay, you have to be careful because some of the AI models they're developed sort of to please us, which can get in the way of their objectivity to the extent that they even have objectivity. Okay, so they might tell you, oh, don't worry about this issue, and may have picked up on it that you are really worried about it and don't want to be, and so it's telling you, oh, don't worry about it, and the next thing you know, it's actually very important, and now you're in trouble. Okay. Um, so all of these mishaps, they do have implications for litigation, either by opening you up to potential litigation, or by putting you in a position where if you're in litigation, your position is not as strong as it might have been had you used AIs more prudently. Okay. So where you might use it um, well is, so I've got in one of the estates that I'm administrating, I have a problem with a lender who has delayed months and months and months in recognizing my authority. So I may have to go to court to get an order forcing that lender to do certain things or to refrain from doing certain things. And I've been thinking about how I can use an AI to be more efficient in putting together the documentation that I may need if I have to pursue litigation. And one of the things that I'm thinking of doing is using it to go through my personal cell phone records to find the exact dates that I called the lender to their customer service to deal with the matter at hand, right? So instead of having to go number by number through 3 or 4 months, or actually more like 5 months, this has been going on, 5 months worth of phone records, not dozens of calls a day, but many, many calls a day, and potentially missing the number. An AI could be very efficient in going through and finding the numbers, the dates that the particular number for this particular financial institution was contacted. Okay, so something like that could be very good. Now, I would supplement it from my own recollection of how many times I spoke with the lender to make sure that the AI identified all of the instances. But in the end, the AI is probably going to be more thorough in identifying the number of times, the times that I called, than I would be going through the phone records manually. Okay, so in terms of litigation support, that would be an example of where I think it would be very effective. Okay, again, potentially more effective than a human being, without creating any kind of liability. So I would be very comfortable saying to it, if I were challenged on that, well, how did you know you called on all these dates? I would say to the judge, Your Honor, I uploaded my phone records into Chat GPT, and Chat GPT identified every time there was a call to or from the lender's number. And Your Honor, artificial intelligence, it is going to be much more thorough and accurate for a task like that than I would be myself going through them manually. And so that's how I did it. I think that argument would be compelling for the judge. Okay, let's take another quick break. Probate and Trust TV, your curated source for the most useful and insightful content on estate planning and trust and probate administration, featuring standout professionals like Bill Gross, Paul Brabelet, James Cunningham, and yours truly. Whether you're a lawyer, accountant, Real estate professional or working on your own succession plan, this channel helps you quickly find the clearest, most practical content YouTube has to offer. Subscribe now to Probate and Trust TV. Spend more time learning, less time searching. Okay, so I've gone through some of the concerns about AI, how it can be used properly in administration, where there's legal and confidentiality and security risks, what its implications are for litigation. So I want to wrap things up on this topic by talking about how, if you're not already using AI, or maybe even if you are, how can you do so prudently or more prudently? And that really comes down to having a policy for yourself, for your firm, if you have more than one person, on how AI should be used. Okay. And especially if you have a multi person firm, always best to have policies in writing. So, uh, if you're so think about, what are you or your people permitted to use, for what are your people and you permitted to use AI? Okay. And that would get into the issues of privacy, data security, etc. Okay. What supervisory approval may be necessary? So for example, let's say you've got a lot of people in your firm, you have several layers. Okay. And by the way, maybe you're not a professional fiduciary, but you have a company, that and you have other people working there, and they're helping you with the administration of your parents' estate. There's nothing wrong with that per se, if you're using the staff of your business to help you. Okay. But especially if they're not familiar with the issues of estate administration. So then they may just go ahead and use an AI to help them with some kind of task. And then you don't realize until it's too late that there's been some sort of confidentiality breach. Okay. And so if you are going to use it, and it doesn't have to be anything, long and drawn out and particularly fancy, but just put down some basic rules. So, if any documents are going to be uploaded to an AI, it needs my approval before you do that, so that you, as the person knowledgeable, having watched this show, right, you can decide whether this is something that it's okay to upload due to privacy concerns or data retention or whatever. Okay. Or maybe you have an enterprise level AI system at your company already. Okay. And so in that case, it's not going to matter. Or maybe maybe it has the ability to sort of segregate out what you're doing. And so if anybody at your firm is going to be helping you with the administration, they have to know to use that segregated portion of the AI, or however that may work. Okay. So set the basic use policy, and then make sure that you train your staff. Again, I don't think this really differs whether you're a professional or whether you're doing this one off. If you're going to have people helping you, they need to know what are the ground rules for using AI. And again, it doesn't have to be a day-long seminar. It could be just, you could just get together for 30 minutes and say, okay, look, I need, because I'm administrating this estate, I need to be concerned about issues A, B, C, and D. These are the guidelines for how you can use AI as you're helping me with my administration duties. Okay. And make sure they understand the limitations, the risks. Okay. So I think it's silly to set constraints without explaining to people why those constraints exist. Okay. Because oftentimes constraints seem they're just there to be constraining, when in fact there are good reasons for them being there, and people need to know that. Okay. Finally, what disclosure needs to be made? So for example, do the beneficiaries need to be informed that you're using AI to help you with the administration? Okay, and does let's say it's a trust. That's an easy one because this trusts often uh, put down in writing what the various obligations and duties and authorities of a trustee are. So, does the trust restrict the trustee's ability to delegate? Okay, and if so, does using an AI constitute a delegation of duty or a delegation of authority? Okay, so that's something also to consider and put into your policy. Okay, and maybe you need to talk to your lawyer and say, within the verbiage of this trust agreement, how would it view my use of AI? Would that be a permitted delegation of authority, or would it not? Okay, and then finally, keep in mind that that an AI is a tool. Okay, and this is we're coming back to where I started out. Fundamentally, AI is right now at least is a productivity enhancing tool. So whatever policy you're going to establish, it should be most likely within that, keeping AI within that realm of enhancing productivity, and it should most likely restrict the use of AI, uh, and so that it's not used to make what otherwise should be human decisions, human judgment calls. Okay, so in the policy, it's as important to say for what issues it may be used as it is to say for those for which it may not be used. Say, so be clear in both of those. Okay, and that way the people who are working on it, they can do so in the best way. Okay, so those are my thoughts on using AI in a fiduciary capacity. I'm sure that over time my ideas about this will evolve, and I think at some point I'll do another show on this topic as I integrate AI into my practice more. I'll share that with you, including any pitfalls I find along the way. But I do encourage you to think about it and experiment with it. AIs are an enormously powerful tool, and if you listen to discussions about AI, you hear all kinds of things. They're going to wipe out all jobs or this or that. I don't buy they're going to wipe out all jobs. What I think they're going to do is they're going to bifurcate. So those of us who figure out how to use AIs responsibly, productively, okay, they're going to make us more valuable. And those people who shun them are going to be more likely to get passed by. Okay, so just like we had to learn how to use the internet, we need to learn how to use AIs responsibly and productively. And so I encourage you, if you're not already experimenting with it with respect to your professional life, to do so. I'll refer this, wrap up with this, and this may be useful. So on one of my other shows, I think it was Business Lessons from the Military, I had a viewer who asked me a question about getting. He said he was in blue collar work. He didn't specify what, and he said, "What was my advice for getting into white collar work?" Okay, maybe it was on people making money, but in any event, he asked me that question, and my response to him was, "I'm not sure that getting out of blue collar work today is a good decision. It is the case that white collar work is more vulnerable to AI, okay? Especially anything of a clerical nature or an administrative nature in the broader work world, not in the trust and estate world, is more vulnerable to AI. What I recommended to him was he figure out how can AI be used to make his blue collar work more productive. Okay, and I don't know. I don't know if he was a tradesman, electrician, plumber, HVAC guy, or if he was in some kind of manufacturing, maybe. But somewhere in, I think, virtually every kind of blue collar work out there, there is a way that AI can be a productivity enhancer, and but the people who are going to know that are going to be the people who are already doing the work and see, oh, how can I use this tool to make myself more efficient? How can I work more smartly using AI? All right. And there's two opportunities there. One is to be someone who is more efficient, more productive, and that's always an enhancement. But two, it gives you the opportunity to train others on how to be more efficient, more productive. Okay, so you've got your opportunity in your primary work, but you also have an opportunity doing some consulting to other people, maybe who are in your industry. So that's my approach to AI. It's one of the reasons why I did this show. And hopefully you found this not just interesting, but you find it useful if you're involved in trust and probate administration and in any other way in any other areas of your professional lives. So thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time is my show, Business Lessons from the Military. On Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time is my show, People Making Money. And then every other Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time is my show, Jiggers' Place, where we have a cocktail and a schmooze, and we talk about non-finances related topics. So I hope you'll join me again later in the week. And that just leaves me to thank you once again. Oh, by the way, if you have questions, comments, criticisms, links will be in the show notes to social media, as well as my email address. And that's on all the platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast. So feel free to reach out to me if you would like to. And got to wrap things up now. And so thank you very much again for watching, and signing off as I always do. Marie, darling, you are my belle. Courage at all times, my friends.